Hey everyone, welcome to the 366th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a lot to talk about today. We are going to be giving you an update on how people are using Bluetooth. We've got a new act for medical device security. We've got some new chip announcements, and we've also got kind of an update on a startup I'm really excited about. And some bad news for people looking for development kits for IoT. We also have a few product updates for HomeKit, and there's a new Eufy security cam out there. And we're going to do a deep dive on how we're feeling about Wise, plus talk about one of their new gadgets. Our guest this week is Helen Griner, who is the CEO of Turtle, the maker of a weeding robot. She is also a co-founder at iRobot, the inventors of the Roomba. So we're going to talk about a lot of cool stuff you'll like. And we're going to hear from our sponsor, Save Our Standards. But first, let's hear from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Rack Wireless. Start developing hardware for IoT applications easier with the power of RUI3. Rack Wireless introduces a software package with a robust API and preloaded tools that allow access to application frameworks, functional libraries, hardware abstraction layer drivers, board support packages, and even the use of RTOS. Don't miss all the features this amazing tool brings to the Rack Wireless ecosystem. All right, Kevin, let's talk about Bluetooth. We just don't do this very often, but they did last week their 2022 market update. Every year, Bluetooth tells us, gosh, how well is Bluetooth doing? And every year, it's doing really well, according to the Bluetooth Special Interest Group, which is the organization in charge of Bluetooth.
I would expect nothing less from the Bluetooth SIG.
Exactly. I was like, this is probably not surprising to any of us. But there are some trends and things to know. One, looking at this, Bluetooth is actually still doing really well. And in our little network of the world, like smart home device shipments, there are going to be 552 million Bluetooth smart home devices shipping in 2022, which is quite a bit. And here's where it gets a little interesting. They're expecting that to get to 1.1 billion. So that's doubling in the next 5 years, which, based on the plans for smart home device deployments, that doesn't actually seem like a lot. But I think one of the issues is Bluetooth is not part of the Matter spec. It's using Thread as its low data rate and then Wi-Fi for high data rate. Bluetooth still has a role in that as a way to easily connect your device. So like you can do a Bluetooth to connect and put your device on the network. But I'm seeing a lot of companies, they might add that, but a lot of them are just using a QR code.
And just in general, while the smart device shipments that are expected this year sounds like a big number, it's actually only about 10% of all Bluetooth device shipments. There's Bluetooth in every computer, every phone, every tablet, so many streaming devices, in cars.
Yeah, Bluetooth is not in danger of going anywhere.
No,
and if it
definitely
doesn't
not.
become like a superstar of the smart home, I'm recording this on a pair of headphones that have Bluetooth, so clearly.
Well, it's funny you say that, because the big spotlight on the first page is all about the upcoming adoption of Bluetooth low energy audio, which we heard about before the pandemic, but it seems like it kind of treaded water until then. So maybe this year is the year LE audio is coming?
Yeah, it was the CES 2020. They did a big announcement because what that does is there still is Bluetooth Classic, which is for audio. And then there's Bluetooth LE, which is Bluetooth low energy for devices. And they used to be separate, and Bluetooth low energy audio basically combines them. And the issue was like the audio codecs. But that presumably is solved. So we're excited about that.
It is good. I mean, if I can get more, hours of usage out of my wireless headphones, I'm all for it. I don't think it's going to be a major change in sound quality and such, but it's an energy efficiency thing.
Yeah. Now, I will say the other thing that's in this report that we saw a lot of, probably in 2019, even as far back as then, is broadcast audio. And I have been waiting for this for a long time. And this is broadcast from like one platform device, like a phone or a computer, to multiple Bluetooth headsets. And I was excited about this because like I sit there and I'm imagining listening to, I don't know, something on the airplane with my kid, you know, and we both would have our Bluetooth headsets and we could broadcast to both. But you could also think of it like in museum tours or as an accessibility thing for anybody who's got a hearing aid and needs to like hear something a little bit better. You could broadcast to multiple people in that situation. I think it's a really interesting tech. We haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, we haven't seen it from the Bluetooth SIG yet. We have seen some vendors actually create their own solution. I know several, at least 2, maybe even 3 generations of Samsung smartphones have, at least at the high end, have supported 2 Bluetooth connections, so 2 people could listen at one time. I don't know which models exactly have it because I don't use a Samsung phone these days, but I know that, again, some vendors have jerry-rigged something.
It may be the Bluetooth broadcast audio. I haven't seen it everywhere. I felt like it would be ubiquitous by now, I guess. The other thing worth mentioning in this report is I did a quick search for Bluetooth mesh because that was a big deal a while back. And I thought it was going to be big for enterprise and industrial and lighting. Bluetooth really wanted to get into kind of the Zigbee Z-Wave sensor market. They were hoping for this in like enterprise and medical groups, like basically being able to control multiple Bluetooth devices from a single hub, having it be a mesh network so it is a little bit more resilient, so you don't have the limitations of like, oh, I'm too far away for Bluetooth to work. So in a big office building, you could have this mesh set up. And it doesn't seem to be adopted very much. In the report, it only gets 1 mention this year, and that's in an enterprise setting, but I haven't seen a lot of hubs or anybody developing Bluetooth mesh solutions for this area.
They also mention a couple of other what they call key use cases for asset tracking, which I'm not sure that Bluetooth is the most ideal way to do that, but I mean, it's certainly an option. They mentioned digital keys, and I don't like this idea at all because of the range of Bluetooth, and I'd rather use an NFC chip, which is almost within an inch or 2, maybe 3. It's just harder to crack that because you physically have to be there. You can't do it as remotely, but.
Yeah, I'm with you. Speaking of cracking, let's talk about security, especially as it relates to medical devices. We have good news for y'all if you care about this sort of thing.
Well, we think it's good.
Should.
I think it's good, yes.
A couple senators have introduced something called the Protecting and Transforming Cyber Healthcare, or the PATCH Act. And they basically are setting in place standards for medical devices to be more secure. And that's before they go on sale. And a lot of the legislation follows a lot of the best practices we've seen in some of the executive orders and the NIST guidelines for protecting connected devices. So as part of the PATCH Act, what they're doing is they're requiring a company to develop cybersecurity standards before you apply for approval through the FDA. So this brings in the FDA into this, which is, in charge of medical device approval. So the FDA is going to assess this. They're going to have the manufacturer design, develop, and maintain processes and procedures to update and patch the device and related systems throughout the life cycle of the device. This doesn't say that you have to do so, but it's going to make it easy because a lot of times in the medical device industry, companies are like, well, if I patch it, it might change the functionality, and then I have to go back to the FDA for approval. The FDA is now, they have said in the past, they're like, no, that's not true. But people still cite that as a reason for not patching. And this law basically says that is absolutely not true. It also requires a software bill of materials for any device that's going to be provided to users. Software bill of materials, we've seen this already. There's an executive order around it. This is a list of all the software that is used in the device. And the reason you would do this is because our devices are more complicated, but over time, as a vulnerability is discovered in some weird TCP/IP software, for example, open source TCP/IP software, you can actually easily find out if your device uses that and then patch as needed.
And that's key, I think, for, really any device. that you have any connected device, because you might hear about a security vulnerability. You'll see what they call a CVE report, a number attached to it, and a whole bunch of jargon. But how do you know if your devices use that software or not? Well, there's nothing to refer to unless it's a truly open source software device and you know where to look. But if they have to provide a software bill of materials, you can just go back and look and say, is this software or is this API or is this protocol used in my device? Oh, it is. It's affected. I need to go look for a patch, or go to the manufacturer and ask for a patch or whatever. It just makes things a lot easier for everyone involved.
Yes. And by the way, this law is going to require you to have somebody who's actually doing that, who's looking at those CVEs and assessing this. So you'll have to have someone who's tracking your devices for vulnerabilities. And if there are issues associated with your device, you're going to have a coordinated visibility disclosure. So you're going to have to share with people that, hey, my device is affected and here's what we're planning to do about it. So again, these are basic best practices. They also are not different from some of the other cybersecurity legislation we've seen for connected devices. The biggest thing here is that it's bringing the FDA in to really reassure medical device manufacturers that by implementing security best practices, they're not going to mess with their market approvals. So, very important. We will see if this law gets passed. It's obviously just been introduced in the House and in the Senate. So they're going to each have to go through their versions to be like, yeah, is this good law? Let's tweak it. And then they have to reconcile those. And then we have to send it off to Congress.
Depending on the final legislation, the wording of it and what gets approved, if anything, I would certainly be more apt to look for FDA approved devices going forward after that. I have many devices that are not FDA approved, but they might measure my heart rate or my steps or whatever it might be. They don't put any of that into place, anything we just discussed. And I would feel much better knowing that these safeguards are sort of in place at that point.
One of the issues with the FDA approval is the FDA is not going to approve a device based on if it's secure or not. That's not what this law does. But another reason your stuff doesn't have FDA approval is because the algorithms and such are not. They basically didn't want to pause the release of their product to make sure the FDA approved what's inside.
They don't have a high enough level of accuracy for the FDA to classify it as a medical device, whether it's class 1, class 2, etc. Agreed. Totally agreed. But going forward, if the FDA does approve a device and it has those cybersecurity aspects, like certain aspects of some wearables are FDA approved.
That's true.
But that doesn't mean they're secure.
Yeah. Well, and this should just make you feel better about infusion pumps in your hospital. They're going to get updated. Or you're going to know that they're not secure. MRI machines, the software running those. I mean, this is far beyond just like activity trackers. This is a really big deal. So,
I'm getting a software bill of materials before my next MRI. I can guarantee you that.
I would like to see the software bill of materials on this machine.
I'm not getting in that tube.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about energy harvesting. Yay! A couple weeks ago, actually, I think it was probably 2 months now. Maybe 3 months. No, 2 months. I had the CEO of Nowie, which is a Dutch chip firm that is doing energy harvesting chips. And the CEO at the time pointed out that they were going to do a release of a new, highly integrated chip that would basically, if you wanted to add energy harvesting to your sensor product, you wouldn't have to do any of the complex calculations related to, this device can only go up to this voltage and the solar charging only allows us to get to this level during these times of day. So you have to do all this like fine tuning to get a device to use energy that's been harvested from solar or temperature change or motion. This makes it a lot easier. And they now have their chip that he was talking about launching. It's called the Diatom. And this is going to be the easiest way to add energy harvesting to your device. You just don't have to worry about all the voltage stuff that you're going to have to figure out if you're doing this by yourself.
And it's teeny tiny, 4x4 millimeters.
Yes. I mean, and these are not going to power like a Wi-Fi radio. This is for like a Bluetooth low energy radio that wakes up like every now and again when something happens. But it's really pretty cool. And I'm excited. Y'all know that if we ever want to get to, a trillion sensors or whatever, we're going to need energy harvesting. Now we could have it.
You don't want a trillion batteries?
We don't need a trillion batteries.
No, I agree.
Speaking of energy harvesting, we have this one is an energy harvesting silicon. This is super low power IoT systems that can run on a battery for a long time, or maybe an energy harvesting thing. You could stick it in with the Nowie chip maybe in the future. Wiliot, they make stamp size computers and that connect to the internet, and they're called Pixels. And they basically announced a new way to sell their stuff. And this is worthwhile because Wiliot is a chip pioneer. And it's really hard to get new silicon into more places without a lot of design help. So Wiliot has announced the Works with Wiliot program. And it's going to it's a bunch of companies that are acting as systems integrators for Wiliot Pixels. And they're going to bring them to more places, hopefully. And the Pixels are pretty cool because they can use energy harvesting or batteries for a long period of time. You can stick these on packaging, on consumer goods, in industrial spaces for things like monitoring. And because they have a little bit of memory and they can talk out to the world, they're pretty versatile.
Yeah, they put together a whole package for these new integrators. They were calling it a partner enablement kit, which gets you a year of the Wiliot cloud service, gets you IoT Pixels, which you just mentioned, I don't know how many, bridge devices, gateway devices, a starter kit, and then, developer documentation and forum support. So, but yeah, I mean, you can make the best chips in the world, but if you can't work with partners to get them in devices, it's not going to amount to anything. So I think this is smart.
Yeah, and the idea here is that these will be so easy to deploy that, you could one of the kind of fun use cases I've heard about is imagine in a hospital, you could have these tags on your drugs, right? Like your medicine in your pharmacy. And when you're looking for something, you could just tap in that you're looking for this particular medicine and the bottle could flash, right? Or the tag on the shelf could flash to be like, here's where it is. So you can think of a lot of really cool ways to use this sort of thing, especially when you don't have to worry about changing the batteries on things. So, yay. Speaking of innovation, the chip shortage is costing us innovation.
Yes.
This is highly intuitive. And I was actually just at an event last week. I was at this Tiny Machine Learning event, so Tiny ML Summit event. And I had a couple conversations with people, and basically it's hard to find development kits, and some of the chips associated with certain development kits aren't available. So everything's sold out. So hardware engineers can't play with new stuff.
Yeah, when you first mentioned the story here, how the chip shortage is hurting R&D, I'm like, well, wait, I mean, they can't get development kits? Because I'm thinking they could, but no. I mean, so yeah, R&D has to be held up because if you don't have the newest chips with the newest features, you can't get them. And I can understand why you can't get them because those aren't like million and million unit runs of production to begin with. Development kits are a small segment of the total chip production line. You're not going to make a million chips if you only have 100 developers or partners. So these guys are probably way at the back of the line in terms of catching up on chip production.
Yeah. And when they're designing development kits, sometimes they're like, I talked to somebody and they were like, yeah, we'll design the board with the parts we can get and we'll order those parts as soon as we can. We put the board together and we ship it out. But then if we can't get those parts again, we have to redesign the board. And if you think about that from let's say you're testing new products, if your boards change each time, that's a big issue because you've got to relearn some things. Maybe you're using slightly different software. That means your pilot project might be running multiple versions of different underlying code for the firmware and things on the board that need to be managed.
Heck, even an enclosure for a device is going to change potentially based on the board size and shape. I mean, your power requirements may change. Everything can change. That's the downside. Everything can change. Software, hardware, etc.
Exactly. Okay, so that's bad news, but let's talk about, I don't know, existing smart home devices. I feel like it's time. So
Good news for updates. I have, as most people know, regular listeners know, moved over to HomeKit over the last year and change, probably about 15 months now. And it still needs some work. I mean, the devices work great, everything's stable, but there are certain functions that you just can't easily do. However, TV OS for the Apple TV just got an update to 15.4, and it now makes it a lot easier to view a live feed from any of your HomeKit cameras while you're watching TV. It used to be a hellacious process to try and do that. It would be easier to just get out my phone or whatever and do it. Now you can literally just ask Siri to say, show me the front door camera or whatever you'd like, and basically get a picture-in-picture pop-up. It shows you the live stream, doesn't interrupt your TV viewing. I like to do this when I hear a noise, but a camera hasn't notified me of seeing anything. Just I'm like, is somebody out there? Maybe a camera will pick them up. If so, and I'll just try, pop in on that camera. It's so much easier to pop in on the camera now. You can do it with your Apple TV remote as well, but it's like 4 navigation steps. So I would avoid that if you can, unless you want to be silent. I would just press the Siri button on the remote and just say, hey, Siri, do your job.
Do your job. She loves that.
Do what I pay you to do.
Speaking of cameras, there is a new camera, and Kevin's kind of not sold on it.
I'm not sold on it for me or for most consumers. I do see a market for this. It is the Eufy 4G Starlight Camera. Sounds great. Starlight meaning it has night vision. It's certainly bigger than a typical camera as it's deeper. It's not like a cube. It's more like an elongated type camera. The new thing here is the 4G. It has got an LTE 4G radio built in for AT&T's cellular service. So this would be ideal for a small business that maybe their Wi-Fi network doesn't reach out to where they want to put cameras.
There's dashboard cams, but maybe you're parking in a sketchy area and you just want to bring it. It might be fun to put this if you're if you're going camping and there's cell service, which is kind of doubtful. You could stick this near your tent to make sure no one steals your stuff.
You could put it anywhere you've got 4G LTE service and watch whatever you want.
Basically,
to be honest.
Yes. That's what this is. If there's ever been a spot that doesn't have Wi-Fi and you don't mind paying $30 a month.
So the camera itself costs $249, which I don't think is outrageous for what you're getting. You've got a 2K resolution sensor, 2.5 times digital zoom, color night vision, a spotlight, and it should run on battery for about 3 months. It also has built-in onboard person detection. So it's got like an AI system built in. It's not going to the cloud. Thing is, you've got the AT&T service. That's going to cost you $30 a month. So that's a big chunk of change. You're going to have to really need this, in my opinion, or have a situation where Wi-Fi is just not going to work for you. So again, I think it's a limited audience, but it's an interesting product.
There's definitely a market for this. It's a small market, but sure.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And now we're going to talk about Wyze. And, well, Kevin's got a product, but before we talk about that, I feel like I might have let y'all down. We talked last week about Wyze having the security flaw where, you could access content from the video content from the SD cam. And we talked about how Wyze had known about this for months and had not updated it. Years and had not updated it. And at the time, we just kind of told y'all all of that. And then we saw some people talking about how they were done with Wyze, how this totally broke their trust. I saw an article in Bloomberg about it. I think a tech reporter, Sean Hollister, had talked about it. And I felt like, should we have talked to y'all and said, hey, this is reprehensible behavior. If you know that you've got a reasonable security flaw, shouldn't you address it when you're told about it? And I was like, I feel kind of guilty. And then Kevin's like, well, he had a different opinion.
First of all, there's no excuse for Wyze leaving this issue open from March 2019 until this past January, right? I'm not excusing them in any way, shape, or form. And the specific issue here was that people could access the videos on your SD card in your Wyze cam. And we mentioned that. I didn't go out on a limb like Sean has done in his article saying, I'm done with Wise. And that's his right. And I don't disagree with what he's saying. He feels, they violated the trust. But the actual exploit would have required someone to have access to your home Wi-Fi. They'd have to get the camera ID. There's a lot of little things that would have to happen that I didn't feel, and we didn't go into all the details of that, but I didn't feel it was like, hey, everybody stop using Wise because of this. If it was just a wide open threat vector and you didn't have all these hoops to jump through to get access to the micro SD card, yeah, I would have been more vocal about it. So I don't know. I mean, you could say we let people down, but I don't feel that way. I mean, people are going to listen to us and make their decisions. And, I still have Wise cameras and I'm still using them with a micro SD card because I knew my home network is as secure as I can make it.
Okay. And that's fair. And I do there were a lot of people, like, for example, that felt like Wemo had a security flaw because they designed their products for the longest time to, if you were on the same Wi-Fi network as a Wemo device, you could actually control it from your phone if you had the app. They've since changed that because enough people were like, I don't like that. That's insecure. So I see the point in both sides, but you're right, Kevin. But I also think that it is a little bit of a issue of trust. And
yeah, no doubt.
Let's continue, though. Now, this is not this is not a product you want a security flaw with. This is a product that's not very connected, but Kevin tested out the latest Wise gun safe with Bluetooth. What'd you think?
I did. This is a $169.99 gun safe, exactly what the name implies. It's currently on sale for $154.99. It leaves me scratching my head because, yes, as a safe to protect firearms, I believe that it is a good product. It does meet the California DOJ standard for firearm safety in the home. So that's something. It's built with 12-gauge steel. It has a fingerprint sensor that can handle up to 20 fingerprints. It has a 4-number numeric keypad. It even has a hidden door that you can use a physical key. It comes with 2 physical keys as a backup, and there's a USB-C port to provide power in case the batteries inside it aren't working because they've gone dead, and that way you wouldn't be able to use the fingerprint sensor, you wouldn't be able to use the keypad. But I'm scratching my head because this is like any other gun safe or any other safe that you can buy on the market, and they've added Bluetooth to it. And I really don't understand why. It just does not give it that much of a benefit. It actually makes you use the Wise app, so you're kind of tied to your phone because it's Bluetooth only, so you can only communicate with your phone to the device, not to a home network, not to any other devices. You can't create any automations or anything like that. It doesn't even send notifications to the phone when you open or close the safe. It does keep a history of the opens and the closes and failed attempts, which is nice. But I mean, I would like to not be tied to my phone so much. I would like to have lights in my house turn red when somebody opens the safe and I'm not aware of it. I don't want to have to get a notification, which it doesn't even do, or not have my phone and wonder, is anybody in the safe? I just don't really see the benefit. It just seems like a product that they added smarts to, a limited amount of smarts to, because they wanted to call it smart.
Yeah, and I would say I don't have a gun, but I do have a fireproof safe that I keep all my important documents in. I recommend everybody do that, actually.
Agreed.
Passports, birth certificates, social security cards, all that stuff. All goes in the safe. If I had a gun or valuables, I would, for internet connectivity, I would want to know when it's opened because I would want to know if someone's getting into, a firearm. And so, yeah, I'm with you. It doesn't make sense.
This can't connect to the outside world at all. So you could be away from home. Somebody could break into your safe or...
Although I guess that's also like a security thing because once it's on the network, someone could hack your network and get access to it. I don't know. Anyway, this thing exists.
Yeah.
If it sounds like something that you would want, go for it. Anyway, it's time for the Internet of Things podcast hotline, which is sponsored by Schlage. Life made simple and secure. That's how Schlage delivers on the promise of IoT. With products that integrate seamlessly with leading technologies and the Schlage Home app to make setup a breeze, Schlage continues to offer a smarter way in. Find the right lock for your smart home at schlage.com. And This segment of the show is actually where you call us, you ask us your questions, and hopefully we'll answer you on the show. To give us a call, you can reach us at 512-623-7424. And if you do, you will be entered to win a Nest doorbell. Yay! It's a review unit. I've put it up for a little while, but now it's done. It's done its job. So I will send it out to whomever calls us, leaves us a question. At the end of the month, we will draw a winner. It was the end of the month. And we have a winner for March. And our winner, actually, is also the hotline caller that we chose. So, Jonathan, congratulations. You are our March winner. You're going to win a Schlage lock of your choice. And we're about to answer your question. So, let's hear it.
Hi, Casey and Kevin. This is John. My question today is, I have a wife with a job that has an irregular sleep schedule, and I have a number of smart home devices to include Philips Hue lights, Lutron cassetta shades, and a Roomba that I would like to have some sort of tactile thing that she can deactivate all of their day routines or night routines as it might be, such that it doesn't disturb her sleep while she's trying to recover from her job. Thanks for all you guys do.
Jonathan, you are like me. You want the smart home to be way farther along than it actually is, and I love you for it. But what you're asking for is a lot. It's too much for today. It is possible.
But it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. We're totally with you on this. I don't want you to feel bad. Like,
yes.
But today we're not capable of doing it. The most I could come up with was basically letting you create a routine that involved some, but not all of your devices. Like, we could shut down your shades. We might be able to shut off your Roomba. I don't know if it's running. We could do lights, shades, locks, all of that. When your wife went to sleep, she could press the button to start the routine that made that happen. But what she couldn't do is prevent anyone else from coming in and disrupting it.
Yeah, there's no do not disturb lockdown feature, which would kind of be nice, to be quite honest. I mean, if you're in control of your smart home and you say, I don't want any devices to run, I don't want any notifications, etc., you can sort of do that. Mode. Yeah, basically a smart home do not disturb mode, and that's an awesome feature to want. I think, yes, I want it. Stacey wants it too. You could almost do it with some devices using smart outlets, but even the Roomba, if it's plugged into a smart outlet, you can turn a smart outlet off as part of the routine. But if the Roomba is powered up and somebody comes home and says, oh, I think I'll vacuum now, they're going to vacuum. There's just no way to have a true do not disturb as of yet. The closest I've seen, because there's no real way to do this, I have seen some scripts and the Home Assistant forums, and granted, this would require you running your smart home on this Home Assistant platform. People have created some do not disturb features, scripts to do this for certain times. They put conditions in saying do not disturb, after 5 or before this. And I think it's still not foolproof. And I think that's what the problem is. There's no foolproof standard or mechanism to implement this yet in the smart home. But again, I think there should be, and it would have to be done at the household level so that only certain people could override it if you allowed them to, and so on and so forth. But as Stacey said, the smart home is just not there yet.
But if you want to do my thing where you implement a routine with some buttons because you wanted something tactile, there are some options for you. So I use the Flick buttons. They're Bluetooth buttons, but I also bought the gateway that connects it to Wi-Fi. So what happens is I've programmed my Flick buttons to work with my Lutron, my NanoLeaf, a couple other devices. I think my Philips Hue devices are all on there. And so at a click of a button, all of that can go off. So I have a good night routine basically for that. You could also do something like that through a smart speaker. You could turn all of your devices to something and have a Madam A, good night kind of routine, or Hey G, good night. So those are other options if you wanted to attach a button to that. I believe you could do that with some buttons. You might have to go for a SmartThings implementation, but I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of any buttons that I have that work with Madam A that could trigger a routine. I don't think I have anything with Google that would trigger a routine. So those are some of the options available to you depending on if you're going for a full-on do not disturb or if you just want to be like, hey, your wife's going to bed. Just let her set everything to sleepy time at a weird time. That is possible. Okay. If you would like us to answer your question, give us a call at 512-623-7424. Leave your question, and we will put you in the drawing for our April drawing. That is a Nest doorbell camera. And I think that concludes this segment of the show, but please stay tuned for our guest, Helen Griner, who is the CEO of Turtle. It's a Roomba for weeding, basically. She's also a co-founder of iRobot, which made the Roomba, so she knows what she's talking about. But before that, please stay tuned for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Save Our Standards. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Save Our Standards. It's a broad-based group of innovators, small businesses, associations, and consumer groups dedicated to reinforcing the importance of a balanced licensing system for standard essential patents. These patents enable innovation that directly benefits consumers. And I have Brian Dressler, who is head of strategy and portfolio connected car networking at Continental. Hello, Brian. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Stacy. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. So what is Continental and why are y'all a member of Save Our Standards?
Continental is one of the largest global tier 1 automotive suppliers that develops, designs, and manufactures the systems, parts, and components and technology solutions for car makers worldwide, as well as the broader intelligent transportation system. We joined Save Our Standards because we are one of the largest providers of the telematics systems, think OnStar and FordSync, for the transportation sector. And as more connectivity is adopted and more wireless communication standards are integrated into motor vehicle products, these standard essential patents that we've been talking about are starting to play a much bigger role in the development and deployment of our products.
Got it. Brian, so I understand you were originally at Motorola when it became part of Continental. So you've seen the transformation of the automotive industry. And from your experience, what role does licensing play in that industry?
So I think it is important to understand the automotive supply chain structure is different than other industries. Tier 1 automotive suppliers take the licenses for the products that we develop and sell to the car makers. And the disruption we're seeing right now is that Continental is not able to get a license for the standard essential patents that it needs to sell the products to the car makers. Without these licenses, we cannot develop the groundbreaking new technologies and products for the vehicle to everything and intelligent transportation systems of the future. And now this is important. As the broader Internet of Things market expands into new industries, IoT implementers should watch very closely how the automotive market deals with these SEP licensing disruptions. IoT implementers will be next in line to face these disruptions. Save Our Standards is a great place to get involved, monitor these issues, and ensure your voice is heard.
Okay, so where can we find out more about Save Our Standards?
To find out more about standard essential patent licensing, coalition events, and more, visit www.saveourstandards.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Helen Griner, who is the co-founder and CEO of Turtle. Hello, Helen. How are you?
Great. Nice to be here.
Oh, I'm super excited about this. I don't know where I first saw this robot, but I garden, and this is a robot that will help me weed. So why don't you just talk to me a little bit about what Turtle is and why you built this?
Well, in a nutshell, weeding sucks. So we built Turtle, and Turtle's a little green robot that's solar powered. It lives in your garden, runs on sunshine, and it weeds every day so you don't have to. It's got a lot of tech inside, starting with the solar panel. It has capacitive sensors, so it can feel its way around the plants. And it also has about 12 different sensors on board, all fused together to have it be able to navigate around your entire garden multiple times a day.
All right. And so we'll get into a little bit more detail about this works in a second. But first, I have to say, this robot, y'all can't see it, but it looks a lot like a Roomba. And Helen, you are a co-founder at iRobot, which built the Roomba. And I would love to understand what you learned there that you're applying to Turtle.
Oh, so much about getting a consumer product on the market, about taking on a task that is doable by a robot, right? A lot of people have very, very wonderful ambitions, but they build something, but the cost is so much more than what a customer is willing to take their wallet out and buy. So we sell Turtle for $349. We actually put the first Roombas on the market for $200. They're a little more pricey now, many of them. But, when you have something brand new that people haven't seen before, like the Roomba at the time, which was 2002, and the weeding robots today, they don't know that it can do the job for them. So you have to have them be able to take that risk. And, I think about $349 today is about $200 over a decade ago.
Sure. It's maybe a little more than I pay my kid to weed the yard, but she also doesn't do a great job. So let's talk about the sensors you put on this, like how this works in the garden. Because I'm envisioning my current Roomba, for example, has does it have LiDAR? I don't even know, but it has Wi-Fi, it makes maps, it has all these crazy magical things. And I'm like, wow.
It has a vision system probably to make a map. But the first Roombas we put out didn't have vision systems on board, and they still were able to do the entire job very effectively by using local intelligence routines, being able to get around everywhere. Once the price of cameras came down, it was possible for iRobot to put a full-blown vision system on board. But that technology is even tougher outdoors, right? Because of the sunlight, because you have a nice natural boundary with walls. You've got a ceiling to look at that hardly ever changes. Outdoors, it's not like that. So the best, a very effective way to do the job today is how we've done it with the local intelligence, being able to sense the plants, being able to sense if you've bumped into something, being able to follow plants, follow edges, and, combine all those into intelligent algorithms that we run in simulations. We run on a lot of different kinds of gardens to get a full coverage pattern.
Okay. So one of the things that I know is important for Turtle is it needs to be in a delineated space with maybe 4-inch high borders. And to protect the plants, well, I should have you tell me how it works, because there's 2 ways it works.
Mm-hmm. So like any good roboticist, you cheat to make the product feasible. So the way Turtle doesn't run over your seeds or your very small seedlings is we have wire guards that are small circular guards, very simple, little bits of wire, not very expensive. And in fact, we include 10 of each, the plant guards and the row guards in the kit. So if you put a seed in or a very small tomato or, any other seedling, you just protect it with a very small metal barrier. Once it grows to about 4 inches tall, you can leave the barrier on, you can take it away, but the robot can sense the plant. Everything else we define as a weed. So it keeps the entire space on the ground weeded. Just like you protect one little plant, if you have a row of carrots or a row of lettuce, you don't want to protect each one. So we have some linear row guards that you could just put along the row. Again, just pieces of steel.
Got it. And so the robot is actually looking at height as its, decision factor for deciding if it's going to attack it and weed it, right?
Well, if it hits on its rim, its forward-looking edge, it knows where it hits, and it can make an intelligent decision based on that. But if it goes under, then it knows it's a weed, and it has a little spinning weed whacker. So at first pass, it's keeping the weeds from ever germinating with its scrubbing wheels. As it's going along all the time, a little seed starts poking up its head, it just disrupts the growth. But if one dares poke its little head up and it gets to, maybe half an inch high, we've got a little weed whacker, very high-speed spinning weed whacker that off with its head.
Okay, so if my weeds, let's say I deploy this right now in my garden and my weeds are 4 inches high. I told you my daughter was really bad at this. It's going to think those are plants, correct?
It will think those are plants. So you do have to weed one last time. But that's the last time because it's going to do the job for you for the rest of the growing season. You have to pay your daughter every week to do it. Once you have a Turtle, it does it all growing season for years.
Nice. And it's solar powered and it just leaves the weeds behind, right? So it's
It does, because they're very small and they just go back to nutrition. So, and that's, that's the clever thing about this design. This is a whole new way to weed. If you wait for a weed to grow and then you say, oh, I'm going to detect that weed with some very high-powered artificial intelligence, and then I'm going to have a manipulator system come in and measure exactly where it should go and pick it up, and then you'd have a disposal problem for the weed. That's the wrong way to do the job robotically. The right way to do the job robotically is have the robot be able to come out all the time and keep it from ever getting weedy. Just like the Roomba can be used every day and keep it from ever getting too much dirt on the floor.
Okay, now, it is not just this little robot that runs around. There is also an app. So talk to me about why this thing is connected to the internet.
Well, it's actually not connected all the time. It does have Bluetooth on board. And when you go near it with the app, it does, connect to it. So you can update the code. In the app, the user can also specify what's in their garden and be able to keep track of the plantings. And of course, they can name their turtle, which is very important.
That is true. People have those really deep attachments to the Roombas. I totally imagine having a deep attachment to my weeding robot.
There was a study once to Georgia Tech that discovered that 66% of the Roomba users actually gave them names, which I thought was a very high number.
It makes sense. How many give them googly eyes? Yeah. That's the question.
We did actually once try a kit for children where we put stickers on. We still have some if anybody wants them, just write to us. But it didn't really pan out because, the take on it that I have and I have always had is, you buy these things as appliances, right? You buy it because you're sick of going to the garden and it's a weedy mess. But once you get it home and it's living in your home or your garden and it's doing the job for you every day, and you haven't seen anything like it that goes around on its own completely autonomously, and then you start thinking about it more like a little pet, and in this case, a turtle that lives in your garden.
I would love a turtle that lives in my garden, especially if it is also weeding. I would accept any turtles. Okay, so you're doing over-the-air updates via Bluetooth for this device?
Yeah.
Does it get a lot of updates, or what are kind of the things that you're envisioning happening with this over time?
It has in the past had some updates. So whenever we see an issue, we're able to fix it. And we're not envisioning that many this year, but I think it's always a great thing to have for a device that's in the home. So you're not reliant on, we were perfect when it came out of the factory. And I think people are used to that these days. The first thing you do when you get a product is typically update it.
I'm trying to imagine how it would handle slugs. I'm like, oh, they're all over my garden.
Are you pro or con slug?
I'm very con slug.
Okay. Well, I gotta tell you, that brings up a great point, right? I have tried other methods of keeping weeds out of my garden, like straw. We put straw around the tomatoes and stuff. Whenever I do that with other methods, I get slugs. And they are yucky. And then you have to waste all your beer trying to get rid of them by putting it in containers. Because that's how you get rid of slugs. You put an open container of beer and they fall in it and get drunk or something. Have a slug party. So the turtle, I haven't had any slugs in my garden since I have a turtle running.
I'm really envisioning the turtle has these little wheels with the ridges on them that disrupt the weeds growth early, but I'm also envisioning them like really taking care of the slug problem, but kind of in a gross way.
I think it just keeps them from coming into the garden, right? I think it just keeps, there are plenty of slugs in my backyard, right? I just don't have them in my garden.
Got it. Okay. So I saw this product and I was really excited because I already have soil sensors in my yard. And I'm really trying to get as much expertise about my garden as possible. And one of the big things I think is so cool about IoT, sure, you can automate things like vacuuming or now weeding. But what's also cool is I could become like this mini expert about what's going on. And I'm trying to think of the interesting things this robot could bring. And maybe it can't bring anything, but y'all do have another product that might help me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, two things on that. Today, it does have a temperature sensor on board. You can know how long the turtles run and those kinds of things. You can know how much sun is in your garden. Now, we haven't really facilitated that yet because we haven't seen a lot of demand for it. But we do have another product, as you said, which we're very excited about. We just launched it, and we call it the Turtle Garden Plan. one thing that experts all say about gardening is that every 3 years, you really should have a soil test. And most people don't, by the way. Most people don't because you have to make some effort to do it. Once you get the results back, they might be confusing. You're not going to act on them anyway. So what we've done is we've closed the loop on that, meaning that we give you the soil test, you pop it in the mail, and instead of just sending you confusing numbers and results, we actually send you the fertilizer that you need, exactly what you need. So we do this for, reasonably small, like 1 raised bed, 2 raised beds, or 3 raised beds, not a 500 square foot garden, because that probably is better to go to your local farm and get some horse manure or something. But especially for beginning gardeners, folks who really want to know what they're putting on their garden, we send the results right to an app, so you have them with you in your garden. And we think it's a great system because it does close that loop, so you don't have to become an expert on the macronutrients and the micronutrients that you need. We do that all for you.
Yes, I currently buy my fertilizer based on this is for roses, this is for tomatoes, this is for, I don't know, acidic loving plants. And that's still way too complicated. I'll be honest. I'm like,
right. And people, they end up with a bag of fertilizer that's rotting in the garage, might get spilled and smell. And we just send you what you need and multiple different kinds. So many people would just go get one kind. But in the first package, we send 444 and worm casting. So you're getting that really great stuff to start off. When the soil sample test comes in, we look at it and we send you exactly what you need based on the results of the soil test. So not just a generic plan, but a very, very customized plan.
And that's something you subscribe to over time. It's a subscription?
It's a subscription.
And you don't need the robot to get the soil plan, and you don't need the soil plan to work with the robot.
Yes, you don't need you don't need either of them to have the other one. We wish you did, by the way. We wish the robot would go in and do the top dressing of the fertilizer and stuff like that, but we're not there yet. Maybe one day we will be.
Maybe the next generation. I'm like, if I think about like how far my Roombas have come, now I've got the fancy one that like is like, by the way, I see your kitchen counter area is always dirty. Do you want me to spend more time there? And then I've got something, it sucks up all the dirt, but it is a lot more money. But I'm like, I acclimated to that over time.
Right. But if you bought it in 2002, which, by the way, we're very thankful that many people did. I've never been so willing to, shell out $1,000 for a company you've never heard of, for a job you're not even sure the robot can do. I think people are willing to do it because they are sure that the robot's going to do the job. And I think that's where we're at with the turtle, which is why we kept it at $349. Price people can take a risk and get it into their gardens.
Yeah. My only challenge will be like, I've got a raised bed. I've got some back areas that I've got, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to need multiple turtles just to live in each section. Okay. But going back to this idea of smart gardening, walk me through where you think we could get to as we have sensors that are able to roam around the garden, bringing things like light and moisture. I know we're not there yet, but take me to the $1,000 smart gardening system over time. What might that entail and have?
Well, I can imagine, the first shot, full connectivity. So it tells you what it's doing, how much it's done. I think that there's going to be things like, do you ever have critters in your garden?
I do. I have critters.
Taking care of those, being able to take pictures of the leaves, a la picture this, but, more specifically, what kind of disease or, what do you have to take care of? What's going on today? They say the farmer's footsteps is the best fertilizer, right? That means if you go to your garden every day, you know what's going on there. That's something that can really help. Well, we envision we're going to be able to automate that, make it easier for people. So when you look at it, we've already taken on weeding and soil health. And weeding is actually the hardest one. The other things like critters, like disease, like pest control, smart watering, those are all things that this company, I think, is the place to make gardening easier for people on multiple axes.
Okay, yeah, because I'm like, that weeder could tell me that the soil's dry. It could talk to, I have a beehive watering system. It could be like, hello, we need help over here. And to me, that's the reason to buy all this stuff.
And the fertilizer could be directly in the watering system, and the robot can have some control of it. And, maybe some of the organic pest remediation stuff could be, put in as well. And we do envision we can get there, but I know the way to get there is not by trying to do the whole thing at once to sell you the automatic backyard farm, right? The way to get there is to take on the individual things that have to get them out into the real world. We've got, thousands of these out there doing the job every day, and we've learned a lot from that. And we're multiple generations in already.
Excellent. All right. So, Helen, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening, and please subscribe.